Hi everyone, welcome to this part of my course. This is going to be talking about my general setup, what I use to paint here in the studio. Now you can go out and buy yourself, spend hundreds of pounds on stuff and never use it. So to be more specific on what you need is quite useful. Now I've got more things than I need. I've got more stuff, more brushes, more paints, which I've collected over time. But you don't really need to worry. You can be more sort of. I'll show you what I think you need to get started. Oh, by the way, I hope I don't look too freaky. I've got this on a wide setting on my GoPro. I brought myself a GoPro 4 for this project, but when you have it on the wide setting, it tends to make your hands look really big. But anyway, we can try out and see what it looks like. Okay, first of all, I'm going to start with my colour choice. Now, this is my palette, right? And I really recommend a plastic palette opposed to a metal one. Now, if you've got a metal one already, don't worry about it. But I've had metal ones in the past, and I found that they tend to rust, and you get quite attached to your palette. And I kept mine. It was rusting and it was doing all sorts of things, but I still kept it. And it used to cause me all sorts of problems with bits of enamel flaking off. And it wasn't a particularly cheap one, but anyway, and the mixing wells weren't very deep and things like that. So I opted for what's called the Herring Dorchester, and it's by Liz Deakin, and it's a plastic palette. And what I do is, it does take pans, but I just buy the tubes and I squirt the tubes directly into the holes which are there for the pans, and then as I go along I just top them up. But what I really love about this palette is the fact that the mixing wells are so deep, and the benefit of it being plastic is obviously you've got no metal, apart from you've got a metal pin that goes through the hinge, because they're really strong, and I've dropped this and taken it lots of places, no problems at all. But because it's plastic, the colours mix really well. Sometimes I find on metal enamelled palettes that the colours they don't mix. I don't know, you get some kind of resistance, and it doesn't pull very nicely. But it does work perfectly well, but I just don't like the feel of it when I'm doing it. So I've opted for a plastic one. The only thing with a plastic one is it does stain a little bit, but you can occasionally get that off and bleach it, and if you really want to. I don't bother. I just clean it every time, and to me that is clean enough. You don't have to worry, you know. But it's lightweight and it's brilliant for taking outside sketching. You know, I really recommend it. So it's the Liz Deakin. Now you can ask any questions and I'll give you links to where you can get this stuff if you're interested. And I think it comes out about £15–16 this palette, but I've got two in fact, and they're absolutely brilliant, really brilliant. So I highly recommend the Liz Deakin palettes. And basically I try and pair them up in their colour groups as best as possible. But I've got cobalt blue, cerulean blue, ultramarine, Windsor blue, what's that, raw umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre there, which I never use for some reason. Now people will probably say to me you should really use it, but this is the thing with painting, there's no hard and fast rules. Use what you feel comfortable with, but I very rarely use yellow ochre. Naples yellow, which I find fantastic for beach scenes, things like that. Make some nice greys with Naples yellow. It's got quite a chalky, opaque, so you can get some quite nice effects with that. Cadmium yellow, which is like a warm yellow, a lot of red in it. And then we've got lemon yellow, which is a cooler yellow. Raw sienna, I use a lot of that, especially mixed with cerulean blue. You've probably heard me talking, if you've seen any of my YouTube videos, I talk a lot about mixing those two colours. And then I've got magenta, which is a useful colour, along with alizarin crimson, light red and cadmium red. Now, as I've shown in previous videos, you can actually paint a successful watercolour with three colours, lemon yellow, I think it was cobalt blue, and was it alizarin? It might be alizarin or cadmium red. I'm not sure which red I used. But so you don't need all these colours. If you're starting out, just go and get 3 colours and you'll be fine. You can do all the things that I'll be showing you with just 3 colours. You're not going to get the range of colours, but you can still paint it convincingly, and it simplifies a lot of things. But within my demonstrations I'm going to show you over this course, or the beginner's course, we're going to really keep the colours to a minimum, perhaps no more than 5 or 6, maybe 7 maximum colours. I'll even try and do a couple of demos just using 3, but even if it's just sort of a demonstration of a tree or that type of thing, just to show you how, you don't need extensive palette of colours. Sometimes you get these sets of paints and they've got like double that, and I'm thinking, what do you do with it all? But everybody's different. Everybody likes to paint in a different way, so I accept that, and that's fine. Okay, now we're going to move on to brushes. Now I've got lots of brushes, but I've got a handful here. I'm just going to quickly talk about and what I look for in a brush, because there's so many out there on the market. I see them at car boot sales and cheap shops, like pack of artist brushes for like £2.50. Don't bother, because they're not going to do what you need them to do. Watercolour painting can be difficult, at the best of times. It can present lots of challenges, and the first thing you need to do is make it as easy for yourself as you can, and that's by having the right equipment. But saying all that, you don't need to have many brushes. Like I've got this selection here, but I'm just going to talk about a few of the ones that I would, if I couldn't do without, and that's the only brushes I could have. Which ones would I have? Right. So I'm going to go with this one first, and it's a number 12, size 12. And if I dip it in some water and give it a good shake like that, you can see in there, I think you can see, hopefully, how well that points up. Let me put it down by the palette a bit, or what I could do, maybe try that. It points up really well. You're getting, on what is a relatively reasonable size brush, you can do a lot of that. You can do, if you're doing sort of maybe 7 by 5, maybe 10 by 8, you could get away with doing a wash with that brush. So as long as you're not painting anything bigger, that brush could do an awful lot of work for you. It will also do a lot of detailed work for you, because the tip of that is quite small. You can actually end up painting quite a lot of detail with that brush, so it's a really useful brush to have. So I definitely recommend that brush. It's a size 12, and it's made by a company called Simon Art, and it's a Kolinsky. I think that's stable. They are quite expensive, but it's for one piece of kit that you can do an awful lot with. I could paint a whole picture with that brush. But to make it easier for yourself, we have different size brushes, and I would also go for this one. Hang on, get some water and do the same. Give it a shake like that, and again you get a nice point on that brush. This is quite an old brush. I've used this a lot, so it's got a couple of stray little hairs there, but it still works brilliantly. And I think this one, for some reason, they don't have the size on it. But looking at this one, I reckon, well, if that's a 12, I reckon that's about a 6, a 5 or 6. So that sort of size brush. And any questions you've got about brushes, email me, ask me the question, ask the question on the site, and I'll answer it, and I'll direct you as best as I can to get the best. So basically, okay, we've got those 2 to start with. That's 2 that I would definitely want to have. Then I would go for a rigger, and I think this one, again, the sizes aren't on them, and I've forgotten what size I bought. I've got 2. Well, I've got 3 riggers basically, but this 2 would be fine, and I reckon they would be about. Hold on a sec. I think these would be about a size 3 and a size 4. Now, obviously, they're both great for doing twigs and branches and stuff like that, but what I don't have in my kit is a very small brush with a short amount of bristle, or what do you call it, brush on the end, for doing detail work, I would just use one of these. So this one will do the work for a really small brush, but it also gives you the freedom to be expressive with branches and rigging on boats and twigs and anything, seaweed on the beach, that sort of stuff. So really versatile brush, and for me, I don't need a really tiny brush then. I can do it all with this. So maybe a 3 and a 4 rigger. These are made by Proline, and they work fine, and they're quite cheap. So basically we've got 4 brushes there, and then I use this flat brush. It was designed for acrylic, but I use it. It's nylon, I think, but it's fantastic. It's got quite a long flexing end there, and I think that's it. You can get flat brushes with a short amount of bristle on the end, and I don't find them as good. This is brilliant for rooftops and flat buildings and stuff like that. A really useful brush, and that's 1/2 inch flat. So what else? And then this is probably my most expensive one, I think. I'm not sure how much it was now, but it's Isabey, and they make brilliant brushes, and I've got one here which I don't recommend anybody gets because they're so expensive, and unless you're doing really big paintings, I don't really use it that much, but it was about £50–60 I think to buy this one brush. But if I fill it holds so much water because it's made of, I think it's squirrel, but the point on that is incredible. It points up so beautifully, and you can do so much with it. You can do broad washes with it, but you can also paint a lot of detail, branches, twigs, and that's the great thing about you having a really good brush, because you don't have to keep picking up and putting down to get a brush that does the job. You can use one brush and it will do many things. So basically, Isabey are, I think, the king of brushes as far as I'm concerned. And I've had this now 15 years, but I think they are quite expensive. I think they're £45–50 for this one brush. But yeah, so that, and I have those in different sizes. But you know, if all I had was this, I could complete paintings successfully. You don't need huge selections of brushes. Everybody's got their particular one that they like. You know, everybody's got favourites. So this one also is quite useful, and it's I've never bought brushes like this before. But Terry Harrison is a very well-known artist. He's produced lots of books and videos and stuff, and he made his own range of brushes. And this one, I thought it was good for saving time when I'm out painting plein air. It's I haven't actually used it very much, to be honest, but this is called a Special Effects Design Brush, and it's the medium, but it's great for getting texture just around bushes and stuff like that. It's basically it feels like an oil painter's brush or an acrylic painting brush. It's kind of quite bristly, but it's good for getting texture on stuff, and I think they do those in different sizes, but a medium will, you know, you can use just the tip of it. It will meet all your needs, so just buy the one if you want it. And we'll probably end up using that on some of the demonstrations. Okay, so any questions, just ask them about brushes, and I'll be more specific with the questions you have. Okay, let's quickly talk about paper. Now that's going to be down to your own choice and how much you want to spend, but I use Arches £140, and £140 knop surface. So it's got a slight tooth on the paper, not too much, not like a rough paper. It's got a much bigger tooth, and a hot pressed is very smooth. Now hot pressed would be used generally for detailed work. You can get detail on knot surface, and rough. You know, obviously because it's a rough surface, it's good for dry brush and for impressionistic type scenes. I'm sure there are people out there that can achieve detail on rough paper, but basically you're using that surface to your advantage. That's why you'd go with the rough paper, because you're using the brushwork in a way where you are getting a benefit from that surface on the paper. So anyway, I go in between with a £140 knot surface arch. There's plenty of paper makes out there, and really a lot of it is just trial and error, so you have to go with what you think, but don't buy the cheapest. And I think on eBay they sell large packs of watercolour paper and it's rubbish. Don't, you know, unless it's a no make, and it's yeah, don't buy it. So I buy it in half imperial sheets, and sometimes I paint half imperial, and other times I cut it down to quarter imperial. And then all I do is, you can stretch it, and I will do a video on stretching. It probably won't be included in the beginner's course because I know a lot of people don't bother. But as long as you're using £140, I don't worry about stretching the paper anyway. Unless I was going to do something with a lot of water, and then I might. But for the purpose of the demonstrations I'm going to show you, it's just another thing to worry about. There are all sorts of solutions to stretching paper, and I have one here, and this is the Ken Bromley stretcher board. Okay, and it makes stretching paper really easy. And basically all you do is, let me just have one off there. Basically it's got grooves around the edge of the board. You soak your piece of paper, this would be quarter imperial. You soak your piece of paper for 10-15 minutes. I dry it off with, I lay it on a tea towel, make sure it's nice and clean, no grease or anything on it. I lay it on a tea towel, dab it dry, and then I lay it over here, and basically all you do is use a mallet or something, and you hammer in these rubber rods around the side, and that actually pulls the paper down, and you get a bar tight finish on this board. What I'll do is I will do, well, in one of the videos that we're going to do, I will actually use this and show you how it works. I think these are about £15 or £16 a quarter imperial board, and they're good. They are really good, and then you get no movement at all in your paper. It doesn't cockle or whatever, but that's worth looking at. So that's a Ken Bromley stretcher board, highly recommended. Anyway, so what I do is I lay my piece of paper on this piece of MDF I've got, and then all I do is clip on these little clips around the outside, and I find that works really well. Anybody that's seen my videos, you see it works okay, because obviously I produce, you know, my videos on YouTube and I don't get any problems. So what you can do is, if you're using it quite wet, you can then just release one, pull the paper up a bit to try and get the cockle out, and then clip it back down again, and it does dry sort of bar tight. And often after you've done those first initial washes and it's dried, you know, you're not going to apply that amount of water back to your painting, so you know you're then painting on what is a relatively flat surface. So that works really well. Obviously when I'm painting, I make sure I've got plenty of fresh water. I have both of these filled up, and what I tend to do is take the worst of the clean the brush in this one first, and then I dip it in this one after, just to give it a but it's, you know, because when you're out in the field, you have to make do with what you've got. You can't carry these about when you're going out painting outside, but when you're indoors, you can make life again that little bit easier for yourself, and you can you know, have more water available. So I tend to use these two when I'm painting indoors. When I'm outside, which we'll cover in other videos, I just use that, and it works really well too. So another thing I use is a mister bottle sometimes, just to spray the paper. I have different ones. That's quite a fierce one, but this one gives you a much better misting effect, and that kind of is very good for doing skies. It helps to soften the edges around clouds and stuff like that, and I'll be using that in videos. You'll see it's leaking. And I have this little one here also, which is useful. Actually, I didn't realise I had so many, but yeah, I have this little one I use also, but it's essentially the same thing, just for dampening the paper, for softening edges and things like that. But we'll use them in the videos, I'm sure, but if we don't, in future videos you'll see me use them. Okay, so that's it. So I hope that's been of some use to you, and don't forget you can ask lots of questions, and I'm sure you'll have questions you want to ask about how I use different stuff, so just feel free to ask them. Okay, I think we've covered everything I use. Like I say, there's lots of stuff you can buy, but you don't necessarily need it. I don't use masking fluid. I know lots of people do, and it works really well for lots of people, but my style of painting is I like to get it down instantly. I don't want to be spending ages before I actually get painting. I want to do a quick drawing and then paint. That's why I enjoy it. So that's the way I'm going to do it. So let's move on to the next video, and we'll do our first demonstration.